Hello and welcome back to another episode of B2B Unplugged. I'm Dan Bassett, your host and founder of Brandtail, and today I am joined by Mark Larwood. Mark, nice to meet you.
Hi Dan, good to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
My pleasure. So today we're going to talk a little bit about trends in the B2B marketing sector, some things that are happening with AI and brand and leadership and other bits and pieces, and get a bit more detail about your experience and who you are. So before we kick off, give us a bit of an intro. Who's Mark?
Yeah, so I'm Mark Larwood. I've got about 20 something, I'll probably leave it at that, years in B2B technology marketing mostly. I've worked in a variety of different businesses. I've worked in small businesses, scrappy startups, Exaris, CloudClevr, Mblocks, and also some large recognizable brands from Philips through Atos and more latterly O2 and Virgin Media O2.
What's for you? And this is a question I've asked a couple of people, a couple of sort of senior marketers. Is there a big benefit working for an O2 that obviously have a really well established, very good brand? Their sort of business side of their business is the smaller side, I assume. Do you get much of a payoff from the parent brand, as you like? The people generally pull to you. You don't have to do a lot of brand work when you're there.
Yeah, I would say that too is a good example of a business that I've worked at, which has a very, very strong consumer presence and a presence for basically mobile phones, data, contracts in that regard, with a relatively small but still sizable business to business arm as well. Focus very much on SMB as well as enterprise. I was on the enterprise side of things. And yeah, we always talked about the benefit of the halo effect of the brand O2. But at the same time, you almost have to kind of challenge what people's understanding is of that brand, because people think, oh, you're just about mobiles, you're just about data. But in reality, we had a much broader capability than that, crossing IT, communications, everything really, from an ICT perspective. So we often challenge against those kind of like entrenched ideas. But in terms of, if you picked up the phone to speak to somebody, they knew immediately that who O2 was, and it actually sparked a conversation. Oh, I didn't know you did that. And then you have the conversation about what that is you actually can do for those businesses.
Yeah, I guess you automatically get credibility. So from one of those sort of pillars within sort of brand strategy that are really important is credibility and authenticity. You automatically have that because of the halo effect, I suppose. So you don't have to do as much heavy lifting as perhaps if you were.
Yeah, you certainly have awareness, Dan.
Yeah.
I think you still had to build the credibility because that knowledge of which is there in certain industries, of course. But I think if not everybody was aware of who in that space. But contrast that with like an Atos, for example. Atos is very big B2B IT tech industry, but it wouldn't be as recognizable on the street. Yet if you're in IT, you're in technology, you're in communications, you would recognize that as a brand.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's the main difference between a brand like that, an Atos or an O2, and the CloudClevr? Obviously, CloudClevr are a bit more startup and scrappy. What's the sort of main difference from a marketing leadership perspective?
They're very different, but there's lots of commonalities as well, right? The same principles of marketing, how you deal with customers is the same. Yes, you have to work harder in a startup to build credibility and build that awareness, but I think you have a sort of a broader, more free reign to do more creative, more challenging, more interesting things in some respects in a smaller business. And there's certainly more forgiveness to a degree, and there's more speed. I could make a decision today and have something rolled out tomorrow in a CloudClevr or an Exaris. O2, Atos, Virgin Media O2, Philips, big businesses I've worked for in the past, those things can take months to change. They are the archetypal oil tanker going across the Atlantic, right, in one direction and hard to turn.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, most people, I think, that have come from a B2B marketing perspective look at the way that, I don't know, for example, like a big bank might be really entrenched in the way that it does things at Lloyd's or a NatWest or somebody like that. And then all of a sudden along comes a Monzo and a Revolut and they rip up the rule book and it's all about speed and, connecting with your audience and stuff. And I think those, at least in my experience, I don't know if you disagree, but those things are as true in the direct to consumer markets as they are in B2B markets, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think there are not hundreds of examples of businesses which are completely ripping up the rule book, right? A lot of time, a small business is trying to do something that bigger organizations do as well, just do it better or faster or in a more customer friendly way. your Monzas, your Revoluts, or those sorts of organizations completely changed the way that we do banking. Basically, they built from the ground up. They didn't have that legacy that was incumbent. It was kind of, it was holding them back. This is quite different. But those businesses, I think, are kind of few and far between in many respects.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, especially in, I think, the B2B world, a lot of those sort of older businesses are more risk adverse. So I think that's quite often why startups are seen, I suppose, as the sexy way to get into marketing, because it's less risk adverse. You can do a bit more, like you say, you can have a bit more fun with what you're doing from a messaging perspective. Hopefully you're still growing, but it's a little bit more forgiving.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a good reason why big businesses are a bit more risk averse, right? They've got more to lose. They've got more people looking at how well they're doing. They've got shareholders and markets to be concerned about as well. And if they get it wrong from a compliance perspective, then the regulators are more likely to jump down the necks of a big organization with deep pockets than maybe they are with a smaller business.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all sorts of perils in all of those things. You understand the differences, but I've worked in both. I can see the positives and negatives of both sides of things, the pros and cons of both. One's not better than the other. But where I've been recently, it's just really interesting to do that kind of more scrappy, that more kind of immediate, more impact driving activity, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that gives marketers that are in potentially smaller companies, do you think that gives them an advantage in that there's an opportunity for them to stand out by being different, because they don't have that legacy and they don't have the shareholders that are saying, no, we're not comfortable with this or whatever?
I haven't really thought about it, to be honest, but I guess that's probably true, Dan. What you do have in a big organization a lot of the time is you have budget and credibility and the ability to drive things over the longer term. You just can't do some things just quite as quickly, I don't think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wouldn't advocate joining one or the other if I was an entry level marketer, frankly.
No.
I think you get massive advantages from joining a big organization and getting all the breadth of experience in there, and the structure, and I guess the ability to deal with complex stakeholders, and realizing actually the decision doesn't rest just with you, it's with a committee of 17, 20 people sometimes, and how you make those things get through are really valuable lessons to learn early on. At the same time, cracking on with some faster market test and learn activities, marketing initiatives, and being really, really involved in quite a broad part of that activation program or process can be really beneficial as well. I'm on the fence.
Yeah, no, I think I agree largely. I spent some time working for Equinity, which is a big PLC, similar type of thing, lots of red tape, but also lots of structure and lots of budget. So there's pros and cons. So yeah, I don't know that if I was a 21-year-old just out of university, I don't know whether or not I would go one route or the other. I think, like you say, either way, if you're good enough and you're passionate enough, you're probably going to get to where you want to either way. But it's just different learning experiences at different times.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's different learnings at different times, isn't it? Take the most out of whatever situation you're in. Look to learn, look to broaden horizons. It's a tough market right now, right? I think anybody leaving a university course right now isn't guaranteed the 4 or 5 offers of jobs that maybe you and I got, however long ago it was. It's tough, and this opportunity comes, just take it, learn from it, move on. And there's no shame in moving on every sort of 12, 18 months when you're early on in your career, I don't think.
No, 100%. I completely agree. I mean, yeah, there used to be quite a lot of really interesting graduate schemes to get involved in. There was lots of value there to go and work for big companies. I don't think they really exist anymore. I think there's probably a few, but it's challenging. But I think equally, a lot of people that come straight out of university, they want to go and work for a Gymshark or somebody like that, because it's seen as a big fun brand that they can get involved in. But there's so much fun that can be had working in the IT sector or working in SaaS or something like that, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's get on to trends a little bit. There's lots going on in the marketing world at the moment, especially within B2B. I don't know about you, but it sort of feels a little bit like B2B is trying to grow up a little bit. And I mean that in the nicest way possible, because I love the sector, but I think there's been lots of things that it's slow to adopt, whereas our sort of peers in the B2C world have sort of moved quite quickly with. But I think one area where I think B2B is doing quite well is the adoption of AI technology. Is that something that you think is going to be a big factor in 2025? How would you be using it in a role today?
Yeah, I think inevitably the rise of AI in B2B marketing is only going to grow, right? I think there's a lot of hype behind AI to a certain extent, and I don't believe that AI will replace humans in roles as much as some people might like people to think, or at least raise the sort of concern of that amongst the kind of employed base. I think it will help us do better work. I think it will help us accelerate things. And we're already seeing the value of AI in looking at complex sets of data. And let's be careful, it doesn't always get it right. You can see some sort of errors. So you've got to bring a bit of human sort of analysis to it as well. But it's really, really good at accelerating analysis of data, of anonymized customer data, looking at trends in where business is coming from, where revenue is coming from, and identifying other markets you might go after. So it's really, really good in that regard as well. I don't think, I think you can immediately see a fair chunk of AI generated content online.
Yeah,
Yeah, whether it's written, I mean, imagery is getting better, video is getting much better, but I still think you can see the value of it. And there's a danger that we just end up creating even more content. If B2B has been guilty of anything over the last sort of 5-10 years, it's generating lots and lots of content, most of which probably never sees never sees more than 5 or 6 eyeballs, right? So
yeah,
I think there's a danger in that. So the challenge will come for us. How do we really stand out, and how do we communicate something differentiated when actually there's a huge amount of AI generated content out there, and the bots are talking to the bots, or the AI is talking to the AI. I think it's an interesting kind of dynamic over the next sort of 2 or 3 years as things sort of bed in, and we get to a sensible, mature use of AI technologies.
yeah. No, I agree. I think the people that are going to win from this are the people that will utilize things like ChatGPT to get them 60% of the way there, or to brainstorm a thing, and then they start breathing life into it. They start putting sort of more emotive language and the skills of really good copywriters to sort of say, this is the idea that I'm working with now. I'm going to mold it into something that's brilliant. And like you said, like content, there's so much of it already. We don't need more. We need better. We need content that connects, I think. So yeah,
I think that's where the idea of personalization comes in, isn't it?
yeah,
Is there's a level of personalization you want in your content as well, or you want it to feel like it's personal to people without it feeling creepy and kind of, oh, hang on a minute, how did you know my inside leg measurement or whatever it was?
yeah,
I think there's AI should help us be much more personal and feel much more close to our customers, I think.
yeah. I think if you use it in that way, and you use it in a way that it's a tool to help me achieve what I already want to achieve, what my values say I'm supposed to be doing, then it will be very powerful. I think the people that will lose from it are the people that are just copying and pasting, and just using it as a way of chucking out quantity.
Yeah, and you hope the algorithms will pick that up on the LinkedIn platforms, for example, and
Yeah,
start pushing that stuff down. 60% of the way, I feel like it's almost a partnership with your AI of choice, right? You can use AI to do the research and start something. You can then write something up and say, hey, have I missed anything?
yeah,
What would you add to this? How would you restructure this? And just give you some ideas around that. But I think being involved in that process, as the kind of human element is really, really important, and making sure that stuff, A, makes sense, and B, will talk to the audience that you actually want it to talk to.
yeah, 100%. I think it's also really important just to say that if you're on the beginning part of your journey with AI, question everything it tells you, because whilst there are brilliant stuff it does come out with some very rogue things sometimes that are just completely made up, and I don't know what it's doing, but yeah, every now and again it will come up with a very interesting stat that makes no sense. Yeah, and even Google does
Buyer
it.
beware.
I've seen it even with Google, which used to be, almost the holy grail for starting desktop research. You'd start with Google, and the AI overview things even coming up with stuff to make no sense. I googled something last week. I was trying to work out the market capitalization for the SaaS market in the UK, and it came back with something like £85 million, and I was like, that's definitely not true. It's probably 10 or 15 times that, so that's definitely not right, if not more. So yeah, that question everything, I'd say, is a good attitude to have.
For sure.
What about sort of brand stuff? Everybody, I guess, that watches this show probably knows I bang on about brand and the power of storytelling and stuff probably too much. But do you think that's something that B2B is finally catching up with, or do you think it's still a bit behind?
In some respect, I almost feel we're going backwards a lot of the time. I feel like the last sort of 2 or 3 years, there's been a lot of sort of short-termism coming in,
Mm-hmm.
um, which doesn't, yeah. So then people start questioning what is the value of brand, and I worry that a lot of businesses are kind of resting on the laurels of having a strong brand, and therefore feel they don't have to continually invest in it. So it just becomes the short-term sales activation, lead gen, demand gen, that sort of stuff. But the erosion of that brand over time is only going to negatively impact the value of their marketing activity, right? I think you have to be, if you don't invest in brand and invest in differentiation and invest in what the customer perceives you as a business, or even just pure awareness, then if you're not investing in that area, then over time you're going to see fewer people coming to your website. You're going to show up in fewer Google searches or AI searches or whatever it is, things like that.
Yeah.
It's not an either or, Dan, is it? And you talk about this a lot. It's about doing both and having the balance right. Whether that's 50-50, whether it's 60-40, you can argue about.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you're going to go down the hardline route, if you're boring like me and you read the research, then the research says it's 60-40 in favour of brand. It's rubbish. It's never 60-40. It's whatever the situation dictates. If you're a new business and you're a startup, you need to invest a lot in brand awareness because no one knows who you are. If you're an established market leader, you just need to make sure it's ticking over and still, it's on the life support machine and you're breathing some life back into it. But I think it's, like you say, it's always both. It always has to be both in my view. I think, I'm concerned that, and it's part of the reason why I started Brand Town. This isn't a sales pitch, but I'm concerned that people don't see the value in it because, as marketers, we're not good enough at explaining it to, a CFO or a CEO. Generally, businesses are run by people that are either technical or financial. They don't tend to be run by creative marketing types. So I think we have to do a better job of explaining why brand's important. And I feel like a lot of senior marketers don't do that job well enough. I don't know why. Either they don't really get it themselves, or they don't want to have the argument. Or in your experience, when in those conversations, has that been something that you found has been difficult to get across to your CFO? Why you need more budget to invest in brand?
I think it's true that marketers generally have been very poor at communicating the value of brand and the value of investment in brand. And typically that's because you're trying to measure it over too short a period of time. But it's also hard to measure. It's very excess share of voice and all these sorts of things that you can try and measure. But you're a small business. How do you measure those things? How do you measure the value? You end up often sort of, well, we're getting more people coming to our website, great. More views on our content, great. And then there's a leap of faith that says if we're doing more of that and we've got the right content and we can track the general sort of trend of pipeline against those things, then we're doing the right things. But it's not always easy to, I think, have that kind of correlation between I've invested this in this brand building activity over here, and it's resulted in this. Not least because, somebody may see an ad on on LinkedIn, for example, but not respond to it. So if you're only measuring the value of that LinkedIn ad and how many responses to it, it's very easy to say actually that hasn't delivered anything for us. But the cumulative effect of seeing that ad, of seeing the content, of seeing somebody at a trade show or a webinar is where the value is. But it's really hard to measure all of those things in aggregate and the value that brings. There is a leap of faith you have to have, and at least look at things on the macro level to say actually all of this investment is doing the right sorts of things.
Yeah, 100%.
That's my view. I may be completely wrong, and somebody say no, because you can measure all of those things. You just need to have this widget and this piece of software, and it'll do everything. But I'm slightly nervous that those are overpromising.
I agree. You can measure ESOV. You can measure organic reach and organic traffic to your website, things like that. But at the end of the day, it is an indicator. It's not you're never going to get to a point where you can confidently go back to the board and say, this is the return on investment figure. I've invested X amount of £1,000 in brand awareness, and this is the amount you're getting off the back of it, because attribution models don't work that way. There's no perfect way of doing it. I think the way that I've always tried to frame it, at least, is, well, what's the cost of the missed opportunity? If we don't do it, how we're not going to get to this state of our market share or whatever else. Like you say, it's a leap of faith, but I've tried to frame it in that way because I think going down the ROI route is almost an impossible conversation. that's language that CFOs are obviously comfortable with, and you have to speak their language and explain to them the way it makes sense to them. But you also have to have a conversation about what if we don't do it? What are we doing?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's the impact of not doing something maybe further down the line though, right? And that's the challenge. It's, marketing's measured increasingly over short cycles, as is sales.
Unfortunately, quarters rather than in years.
Yeah. You've got to have, you've got to build both those things, haven't you? The long and the short terms.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but you can't measure the value of memory. We want to be top of mind when somebody's thinking about a buying decision. There's no way that you can record that. But yeah, it's an interesting challenge. Yeah, we dived into a little bit about AI and how you might use that, which I think leads us nicely onto leadership in sort of marketing roles. The first question I wanted to ask you, I suppose, is what lessons have you learned that working both in sort of the startup world and the more corporate world that you would probably take on to another role? What are the things that you would definitely do, in your next big role?
Probably three major things I would say consistent across any organization of any size. It's at least two of them sort of relate to people. I wouldn't underestimate the value in actually, through telling a story, bringing people along on a journey with you. People, having the data to back something up. But I think the critical thing is feeling like you're moving in the same direction. So whether you're part of a large organization and you're working on a small part of the marketing program, making sure that you've got a very tight group of people who are all sort of pulling in the same direction, are all kind of working towards the same outcomes and are fully aligned. And I don't mean just marketeers. I mean, there's salespeople aligned to those things. I mean, there's product people aligned to those things. Actually, we're really clear on what our value proposition is we're taking to market, who we're going to market to. Having that strategy really honed and have everybody behind it. If you've just got one person who sort of doesn't really buy into things, that can be the bad apple that kind of spoils everything. Secondly, I think it's about having the right people on the team. And I think when it comes to recruitment, I've had the privilege of starting and building brand new marketing teams. And what I found, and particularly at CloudClevr, was I recruited 4 people into a team, which was just me at that point, really quickly. And person 4 that joined that team was probably very different to the 4th person on the list when I started, because you're bringing people in for attitude, capability, experience, but actually also for fit with the organization. And so person 1 arrives, think, great, actually they fill a lot of these gaps. So actually the second role I'm recruiting is going to be like this. The ability to have that kind of fluidity around who you hire and how you hire, and hire for the group and not just for the, I don't want to use the word silo, not just for the kind of the gap that you think you're filling for, is really, really important. And then I think alongside that, which is kind of a people type thing as well, is around communication. Be really clear on what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what the results are, and what the challenges are, and maybe what the risks are. And also be quick to fess up when something doesn't go as you expect, right? That kind of honesty, integrity, and that communication across the business is really, really important. And I think sometimes you can overlook that when you're in the kind of the midst of battle and you're trying to work things through, you're working these. Actually, we haven't told our senior management team, or we haven't told the sales team what's going on over here. It's really, really important that we're doing this. And I think they kind of all reinforce each other, right? Good communication, good team, all aligned, and you're going to do your best marketing work and you're going to achieve things.
Yeah.
And then the metrics, the measurements, and the KPIs and the ROI becomes much easier to measure.
Yeah, 100%. It's about managing up as well as managing across, giving people, like I say, telling the story, what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, what I want you to do, and make sure everyone goes in the same direction. I think one of the main key challenges with that, I think, is team alignment. People always talk about sales and marketing team alignment, and I'm glad you brought up product, because it's a bugbear of mine that people bring up those two teams, but they forget product. And in technical businesses, that it's just as important that product are on the same page as you as any other team, as well as service, I suppose. What's your what's your strategy to making sure that teams are really well aligned?
Get people in a room, either virtual room or a real room, right? And just, listen, understand, and craft something that everybody can, 80, 90% sign off on. It's as simple as that. It's again, back to communication, right? Having the right flows of information internally, building things on the right sort of research, and bringing everybody on that journey with you. cliched a little bit, I suppose, but ultimately it's about making sure that everybody's on the same bus and they're all going in the right direction. You can't do that if you've got 3 buses going in roughly the same direction.
Yeah, and I guess that's made a little bit easier if your team if the whole company is orientated around the market. If you're all trying to do the job of making customers happier or fixing this problem for markets or whatever. I guess where that becomes a challenge is if you have a sales team that are slightly siloed and they're just purely driven by the numbers, they don't care what they're selling, and you have a product team that just want to build cool shit, and a marketing team that are just full of really creative, wacky people that aren't really directed anywhere. That's where you then have silos, I think. So have you had much experience with that, where you've got sort of different drivers, motivators in different departments, and how do you tackle that?
Maybe not to that degree, Dan, but I think, I certainly call on some experience of the past where actually you had 2 separate product divisions within what was really a small organization of 200 people, kind of targeting different markets and having separate or different calls on the product development teams, the development teams actually, and causing confusion. And I think actually for a strategically minded marketeer or product person, or even, probably not a salesperson, but the strategically minded product person, the strategic minded marketing person, it's an opportunity to go and wrap your arms around things and say, actually, guys, we need to align on this, because if not, we're just going to end up standing for nothing, really.
Yeah, 100%. No, I completely agree. I think it's difficult sometimes, I think, when you go into a new role to almost say, right, I'm the new guy, and this is my direction, come along with me. You have to do it quite carefully.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a little bit of forgiveness in that honeymoon period as well, to a degree. But yes, certainly don't go in and burn bridges before you even cross them, right?
Yeah. It's a book that I've recommended in another episode of the podcast, but How to Win Friends and Influence People is a great read for people that are struggling with that. It's very cheesy and old, but it's got some good messages behind it, so it's worth a look. Whilst we're on the topic of, I guess, new roles, outside of the things that we talked about in terms of making sure teams are aligned and collaboration and things like that, what would you think are the sort of quick wins that you might focus on in a new role, and what advice would you give to people that are potentially starting a new role at the moment?
Yeah, interesting question. Look, it always depends on the situation when you land, right? Broadly, I think building those alliances, building those relationships early into sales, into product, into customer success, into senior leadership as well is really, really important. And I always go in with the base that, one of the questions I often ask is, how can I help, right? So you offer your support to people. And I think if you're looking for quick wins, one of the things I always like to look at is talk to the salespeople around, what are the deals that you would get across the line if only you had this, or if only you had that support? Where are the areas that actually we can get some quick wins by accelerating some things in the pipeline which are already there? If you immediately go to new business generation, top of funnel, then, in the business that I've worked in, you're looking at 9, 10, 12, even 18 months before those come to fruition.
Yeah.
So, to find some value lower down the funnel, bottom of funnel type support where you can actually help get things across the line, as well as looking at the longer term and also the middle of the funnel as well. So broadly, it's finding those quick wins whilst strategizing for the longer term as well. There's no point going into a business and throwing everything out. One, you'll alienate people, and two, you just set yourself up for fights down the line, or for actually just for pure failure, really. It's about being sensitive to the organization and moving at pace, but being sensitive to what you can and can't do in the short, medium, and long term.
100%. I think it's about doing a good diagnosis, but also being realistic. I think, we think we know these are big problems, but let's tackle this one first, or this is the biggest one, or something. And get people aligned on that.
That's an art, though, isn't it? Being able to do that, because I can go and think, oh my goodness, look at all these rabbits. I've got to fix them all. Which one should I chase? And you don't catch any of them because there's so many rabbits running around.
Yeah.
Odd analogy, but I think you get what I mean.
Yeah. No, 100%. It's I'm about to have my first child, so I imagine it's going to be a lot like parenting. It's just trying to catch naughty children.
All I say, Dan, off topic really, but enjoy every minute, because my 15-year-old is now 6 foot, a bit taller than me, and so deeper voice than me. It soon goes.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. Well, I guess nice segue onto I guess aspiring marketing people into the future. So people that are just joining our sector at the moment, what advice would you give somebody that's sort of straight out of university and thinking about it? We did touch a little bit on it before.
Yeah, I reiterate what I said. Get as a broader set of experiences as you can. Don't specialize too early. I feel like over the last 10 years or so, I've had a lot of people who I've interviewed who's, I want to be a digital marketer.
Mm.
I kind of rail a little bit against that because I feel like digital is really a channel, and and isn't everything digital now pretty much? Being a generalist, broad marketer, or being able to do lots of different things, particularly early on in your career, having experience and exposure to all those things will only be of benefit to people. So get those breadth of experiences. And I know it's easier said than done, but don't chase the pay rises and the promotions too quickly, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think not to talk too much, I suppose, about COVID and stuff, but I think that changed quite a lot for young people. I think it used to be the thing that you joined a new organization, you made sure you sat next to or had lunch with the person that was the most influential in the team or whatever, and you learned lots through sort of osmosis. That's not really a thing now because everyone's sat at home with a laptop. I do fear a little bit for younger people that they need to work a bit harder to find those types of relationships where things just, those water cooler conversations that you have randomly with the product owner that they're working on something that you can help them with or something like.
I think that's a really valid point, Dan, because I think this whole kind of return to work debate which is going on. Yeah, COVID hits. Experienced people who've already built their network, already know a lot of people, can go back home, work from home, and still pick up the phone to all those people they talk to, Teams call, whatever it is. Can still have those, still know their way around, still got that network. If you hadn't had that and you were suddenly starting afresh from working at home, it must be incredibly difficult to build those. If you haven't got the confidence because you just, well, I haven't got as much confidence because you're new to the industry, you're new to the business, you're new to work, or in general, it must be really, really hard. So yeah, people just got to find the opportunities to talk to people. Go to networking events. Go and offices are open, right? It's not like offices are closed now that they were 4 or 5 years ago.
No.
Spend more time in the office. Find reasons to go to the coffee shop and meet with people.
Yeah, 100%. I know, I agree. I think if I were in that situation, I'd do that. I'd be in the office 3 days a week. I'd be going to networking events when I can and just trying to meet as many people as possible. Because quite often, I think, relationship is one of the most important things that you can develop in the business world. The amount of job offers I've had just because I know somebody or because somebody respects me or something like that, it's incredible how valuable it is down the line, and it can be years down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, power of the network. Never underestimate it.
100%. Cool. Well, on that note, I think we will wrap up. Thank you very much, Mark, for your time. And, yeah, see you soon.
Pleasure, Dan. Thanks very much.